Hi, this is Geert-Jan. In this screencast I want to show you how to get started creating applications with the JFugue Music NotePad. The JFugue Music NotePad is available on java.net at java.net/project/nbjfugue support, and in the trunk you will find from today the entire source tree of the Music NotePad that is based on the JFugue API. So if you go to jfugue.org, you will find out more about JFugue, the library underneath the JFugue Music NotePad. And now I'll show you how to get started with this application. I'll go to the Subversion support in NetBeans, set my repository URL to point to NBJFugue support, click Next. Specify that I want to get the trunk, and I'll put it into my music, a new folder called Music Platform, and click Finish. Now the download begins. Yeah, here it is. Checkout has been done. 16 projects were checked out, so that's the application plus a long list of modules. I click Open, and here's a list of modules, each providing an API or a distinct feature for the application. What's very important to note is that you must be using at least JDK 7 Update 6, because a JavaFX browser is included in the application, and the JavaFX runtime is included. So here's the JavaFX runtime. However, the native libraries are not included, because since Java SE 7 Update 6, okay, you can see this here, the release notes for Java 7 Update 6, from that point onwards, the JavaFX native libraries are included in the JDK and in the JRE. So here you can see JavaFX SDK and JavaFX Runtime are included in JDK 7 Update 6 and JRE 7 Update 6. As you can see here, I have JDK 7 Update 5, which doesn't include these native libraries. Nothing JavaFX related here, while in JDK 7 Update 6, I do have these libraries. So for one, there's the JavaFX jar in here. What there is too is in the JRE, in libs, there is the JFX RT jar, and also in the bin folder, this is the point, in the bin folder you see a long list of native libraries, in this case for Windows, which would be different depending on your operating system. And you see, for example, at JFX Media, JFX WebKit as part of the JRE. Therefore, the native libraries for JavaFX are not part of the download, since they are already in the JRE, and therefore if you want to develop on this particular music platform, you will need to have at least JDK 7 Update 6, meaning that you can immediately begin running the application. And once you do so, the splash screen starts up, the application starts, and after a moment you will see the JavaFX browser, and it's automatically set to jfugue.org. Once you are here, you can begin playing with the application a bit. So I'll say here, this is piano solo maybe. Click Finish, and now I can click on the keyboard as an input device, and as I add a new note, you can see that it's added to the music sheet. Or I can use a guitar as an input device. I can select as well multiple different notes, and with the up and down key change their location on the music sheet. And by pressing the left and right arrow key, I can change the duration of the selected notes all at the same time. The start is there for creating multiple different parts of your music composition, so a guitar solo, and a piano solo. The idea is that ultimately you'll be able to select multiple pieces and combine them by playing the combined play button rather than the individual play button. There's a lot that needs to be added still. There's a save and there's a play for the music sheet to play and save. There's also, as you can see, a special menu bar, toolbar combination which is based on Flamingo. The start is there. You can see that this is for creating new compositions, and this is for playing. If we now switch to the application sources, just to introduce you to what you see here, the JFugue API module provides the JFugue jar, so it's just a module that wraps this jar. The Musician API is built on top of the JFugue API and has concepts like note and score and composition. So this is a layer on top of the JFugue API. Next, what's important is the core modules. So these are named core because they need to be part of every distribution of the application, while the others are potentially optional. So the different inputs, you could have one input in your free distribution and another input sold to your users. The same with the tools. So there's the composition. This is the composition tool is a composition, instruments, and syntax. So here's the instruments window. Here's the syntax window. Whenever we drop something, you can see that notes are added. Well, they should be added to the. There you go. So the idea is that, see, that's slightly buggy. That note should be added to this guitar window whenever a note is dropped onto the music sheet, and ultimately this should have syntax coloring to show the different parts of it. That's the syntax window. This is the instruments window. And this is the composition window. Automatically, whenever you create a new music sheet, you will see that that it is added to this composition window, so that you can do something with groups of pieces. And whenever automatically you close one of the windows, you'll see it disappears from the composition window. In other words, the composition window is for grouping multiple pieces together, so that's in the music world probably more an enterprise function. So you could, again, distribute the application with the instruments window and the syntax window, and then sell the composition window with grouping functionality as a separate feature to the end user. There is also the resources module, which right now exists to contain all the images, but this needs to be cleaned up so that each module contains its own images. But for the moment, everything has been moved into a single module to keep everything centralized, but it's not really a modular solution. There's the Musician Core, which provides an installer, which in turn sets the background of the application. So you can see this colored background that you see here showing through, that is set in here. And for the rest, there's this play all action at the top here, which is also provided in this core module. So this is really small. The idea is to keep this as small as possible and have as much functionality in the relevant modules. So the score window has a bit more content. There's the score top component. There's also print functionality, which isn't in the UI at the moment, but it should be possible to print out music sheets. There's a definition of what a stave is. There's a stave listener, so that the coloring is done whenever you select a note. There's the composition wizard, so this is also in a separate module, which means when you click on this button, that wizard opens. Ultimately, this module would contain other wizards, not just the new composition wizard, or we could have each wizard in a different module. But you can see that this is really, this application structure really breaks down all the features into as small modules as possible. Now to look at the input, we have input guitar and input keyboard. An input guitar was contributed by an external contributor to this application, and what is important is that, well, there's quite a bit of code that needs to be cleaned up here, but you can see that new items are added to an instance content object. So this is a dynamic NetBeans object. And whenever there's a new note, it's added to this instance content object, which in turn is inside the lookup of the top component, the guitar top component. So here you can see the instance content is in there. As a result, whenever a note is added, is clicked inside the guitar, or in the same structure as in the keyboard, the object is introduced into the lookup of that input, in this case the guitar, to which the score is listening, not directly to that particular guitar or keyboard input, but instead to the currently selected window. So this score window coming from the core score module is listening to the currently selected window for new note objects, which are then displayed inside the music sheet. So that's how the communication works. A similar communication happens with the notes window. This is the syntax window. So this is listening as well for objects being published inside the currently selected window. So if I now have this selected, you can see here the selected notes and so on. So basic introduction to getting started with the application. What would be great to work on, if anyone wants to contribute, is to work on the Flamingo toolbar to add more of the actions. Several actions exist throughout the application. These need to be added to the menu bar. Also, the syntax coloring could be added here. What's needed there is an antler definition file, or a JavaCC definition file. Once we have that, if someone has that for JFugue, we can generate the syntax coloring. What would also be fantastic is if the whole music sheet were to be written in JavaFX, because then we could have some nice effects whenever you drop a note. More inputs could be added for other instruments. A metronome could be added. Grouping functionality, so whenever there's some new instrument, would be great if there would be a lot of functionality for working with multiple pieces at the same time. So there's quite a lot of work to do before this is a realistic application to be used in the music industry, but there's definitely a start that's been made, and the architecture is quite nice and clean. Someone could also take a look at the Musician API. It would be really fantastic if we wouldn't have specific objects like instrument and note, but instead if we could use the JFugue API directly, because the JFugue API has its own objects which are very similar. That would be nice. For example, note. Why can't we use the JFugue's note rather than our own note? So as much as possible, directly using the JFugue API as the communication mechanism, rather than recreating an API on top of that. So quite some work could be done on the model level to clean things up. I guess that's all. Anyone's welcome to contribute. Now you know how to get started and where you need to look for new features to be added. Thanks, and looking forward to seeing contributions in the Subversion repository of the JFugue Music NotePad.